A very good morning to everyone present here. I am Piyush Mishra, and today I'll be talking about the paper Incomplete Multiview Gene Clustering with Data Regeneration using Shape Boltzmann Machine. This is actually one of my papers that I co-wrote with Pratik Datta and Dr. Shriparna Saha from IIT Patna, and it's actually published in the Elsevier Journal of Computers in Biology and Medicine. It was made available in the month of October of this year itself. So the motivation for this paper actually came about because until very recently there were a lot of researchers in the field of genes and gene clustering who were actually using a single modality to carry out research for genes. And what a modality means is that, for example, if I'm having a conversation with someone, there are different ways in which I can extract the information of that conversation. I can perhaps refer to my memory or rely completely on my memory to refer to that conversation, or I could jot down the main events that are going on in the conversation and refer to them later, and or I could just record the conversation in its entirety. So these are different ways in which I am extracting that information. And similarly, genes have these different ways in which one can look at them. So if I'm looking at only one way to carry out research for genes, then I'll have to assume that that method or that view is complete, because if I only have one modality, that is the only information I've got. So I have to assume that it's complete, because then I'll have to carry out the research in that. And often what happens is that because of this very reason, the outcome of these procedures becomes very unreliable or very poor. And to break away from that, we proposed a three-stage maneuver where we first encoded multiple modalities that we used in our computation. And using those modalities, we found the common latent space. And using that common latent space, we use that to carry out different computations to finally find out the different clusters using different clustering algorithms. So first, so this is basically the flow chart of how we went about it. As you can see, there are different modalities to the computation, which go through an autoencoder, after which they come out as a common latent space. And from that, one can find out the clusters using different clustering algorithms. So first, I'll be talking about the different um, modalities that we used in our computation. So first, I'll be talking about the gene expression. So gene expression is basically the process by which information from a gene is used in the synthesis of a functional product of the gene. Gene expression basically has the ability to quantify the level at which a particular gene is expressed within a cell or a tissue or an organism, which can actually provide a lot of information. Like one can identify viral infection of a cell using the viral protein expression. One could determine an individual's susceptibility to cancer using oncogene expression, or one could even find if a bacterium is resistant to, say, penicillin using beta lactamase expression. So gene expression is actually the natural next step to gene sequencing, wherein gene sequencing is basically the process of determining the nucleic acid sequence, that is, the order of the nucleotides in the DNA. It includes any method of technology that is used to determine the order of the four bases, that is, adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine bases, which are denoted by A, G, C, and T, respectively. And further, the next modality that we use is the protein data. Now, why is it that we're looking at protein data? We're looking at protein data because the existence, or let's say the coexistence of a gene, is heavily dependent on a protein, because a gene is present inside a chromosome, and chromosome is nothing but DNA, which is encompassed inside of proteins. And there are many genes which actually cause proteins. So what I'm cause the formation of proteins through the process of protein synthesis. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is that neither can exist without the other. So that is why it is very important to look at the associated proteins that are relevant to a gene. And this data is actually taken from the protein data bank and converted to a comfortable way in which the computation can be carried out. So once all of that is done, we come to the data regeneration part. This is done so that the missing information can be generated. We use a type of Boltzmann machine to achieve that. This is actually an analogy from statistical physics, which says that a fluid tends to stay in a state in which its energy is minimized. So Using that analogy, we minimize the energy function given by the equation as shown here. So this is an equation of the function of the visible layer, the hidden layer, and theta. Theta is basically the set of weights and biases, where the weights become the W matrix and biases become the A and B, where A becomes the bias of the visible layer and B becomes the bias of the hidden layer. Now, this can be done using different Boltzmann machines, as I said. So one can use a traditional Boltzmann machine, and actually we did use that in our computation. And we found that because of a lot of unnecessary computations, there was a lot of overfitting, and which is understandable because in a traditional Boltzmann machine, all the nodes, be the node from the visible layer or the hidden layer, all the nodes are connected to each other. So naturally, this leads to a lot of unnecessary computations. If one has to restrict oneself to some sort of lower computation values, then one can move to the aptly named restricted Boltzmann machine, where the restriction is that none of the nodes of the hidden layer can be connected to each other, and none of the nodes of the visible layer can be connected to each other. So this can be compared with a bipartite graph between the hidden and the visible layers. So theoretically, this should reduce the overfitting. But we found through experimentation that it did not reduce the overfitting as much as we wanted it to. So what we did was that we segmented the visible layer further. And once we did that, we found that the unnecessary computations reduced dramatically. And once that happened, we used stochastic gradient descent with Gibbs sampling to carry out the minimization. And in Gibbs sampling, we basically sample the values in each iteration using different probability values. And so once that was done, the weights and bias updation criteria was achieved. And once the weights and biases are updated k times, and we have reached the stopping criteria, we form the latent space by average pooling the different views. And to carry out the clustering from this latent space, one has to find the optimal number of clusters, evidently. So when we plot the sum of squared distance versus the number of clusters one has to find, we see that an elbow is formed at k is equal to 2. That means that 2 is the optimal number of clusters that one should take. And of course, these results are for the prostate cancer data. So when we look at these two clusters using either the 2D projections or the 3D projections, we find that the algorithm or the pipeline was able to find quite good results, and it did this extremely efficiently. However, this can't be the only way to check its efficiency. So we had to do some sort of comparison with baselines, etc. So we used multiple views for comparing our baseline results, and we find that the incomplete multi-view clustering gives the best results for both the silhouette as well as the Davies-Bouldin index for the chronic lymphocytic leukemia disease, interstitial lung disease, and the prostate cancer data. As a logical next step, we compare our results with existing methodologies, that is k-means, fuzzy c-means, db-scan, and the adversarial incomplete multi-view clustering, which was actually proposed by Kai Zhu et al. In 2019. And we again find that our methodology fares much, much better than the existing methodologies. So besides the statistical impact, what is the tangible result of this study? We can see real genes. We can see that real genes are classified into these clusters from the table in the left for the chronic lymphocytic leukemia dataset. And this makes the work of identifying which cluster is involved in what actions or consequences much, much easier. And from the table in the right, one can see the association of the top 10 genes with the corresponding disease. So this goes to say that the impact of the study, even beyond its statistical impact, is very immense. So with that, I'd conclude this presentation by saying that when we're considering genes, one should consider multiple modalities, especially while studying genes, because they help by acting as sort of backups for us, and that the results from these multi-view clusterings tend to be much, much more reliable than single-view results. Now, if there are any questions, I'd like to answer them.
Piyush, could you say me that how exactly a feature vector looks like?
Basically, as I mentioned, we have different modalities. So we are different. We have the encoding parameters. Our encoding parameters are very different. So, for example, if I'm taking a look at the gene expression encoding, this has all the parameters in a very non-categorical and continuous fashion. So this data is actually normalized very easily because it is very easy to normalize, and the modality is converted to a matrix as given here. So this is one of the modalities, and the other modality, for example, this gene sequence data consists of the strings of AGCT in different orders based on the DNA. So so that is basically very rudimentarily mapped into numerals. For example, if I have A, that will be mapped to 1. If I have G, that will be mapped to 2. If I have C, that will be mapped to 3. And if I have T, that will be mapped to 4. And then once that is done, that is converted to a matrix for further computation. And similarly for protein data encoding, this has all the data from the protein data bank, which again, for some values it is categorical, for some values it is continuous. And so similarly, that is carried out based on the specific problem.
So if you're working on a protein data, so could you say me that what is the size of your matrix on which you have worked?
Again, this was different for different data sets, as I mentioned. The chronic we used 3 data sets. So the genes that were present in the chronic lymphocytic leukemia data set, we took those values, we took those genes and found their data from the protein data bank and the gene sequences. And once that was done, we moved on to the interstitial lung disease. So it varied according to the modality. Off the top of my head, I cannot remember the actual values of total modality sizes, but it was around 20,000 genes per data set. Obviously it varied for different data sets.
Okay. Thank you. So it's over to Anjali ma'am. Ma'am can ask something.
Yeah, I'm quite impressed. But Piyush, can you please send this article, paper, to my email ID?
Yes, ma'am, sure. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.